The warning sirens echoed through every ship in the battered Seventh Armada. Admiral Leora Vex, her uniform torn and her voice hoarse, stared at the tactical display, watching red indicators swarm the perimeter like blood in water. The Krill were coming again. There was no tactical genius that could turn this battle around. Her fleet was fragmented, stretched thin across the Altharian Rift, an unstable region of space where signals distorted and reinforcements rarely made it through. In one piece if they came at all. They had sent the call out days ago. No one responded. No one ever did. Her second-in-command, Commander Thirsk, stepped beside her, helmet under one arm, weariness stitched into the lines of his face. "We have 4 hours at best," he said. "Less if they're not playing with us." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Everyone knew this was a suicide line now. But they couldn't retreat. Behind them floated the outposts of the Yavari colonies, civilian habitats, suspended like driftwood in space. If they fell, the Krill wouldn't just win. They would harvest. She initiated the final defense protocol. Automated drones were launched, forming a thin perimeter shell. The fleet's last ion cannons were calibrated. One by one, officers submitted their last messages to home systems, family archives, memory vaults. It had become a ritual in this war, one observed with grim efficiency. Quiet voice emerged from the lower deck. "Is it true?" "About the Thalorian ship?" Leora froze. She turned slowly to face the young ensign who had spoken. The boy couldn't have been more than 20 cycles. He flinched under her gaze, but didn't retract the question. Rumors had circulated through the fleets for months. Whispers of a Thalorian warship, a relic of a bygone era of peacekeeping that dwarfed any known vessel. A ship built not for war, but to end wars. It had never been deployed. It was said to reside somewhere deep in the Maelstrom Vale, and uncharted. Zone Thaler had long claimed as restricted territory. She almost dismissed the ensign with the scorn such a fantasy deserved. Almost, but there was something in his voice, a fragile sort of hope. And what harm was hope now? "I've heard the stories," she said flatly. "Just stories." Thirsk leaned in. "But Admiral, we did send the Thalorians an emergency signal last cycle. You really think they'd respond?" She snapped out the RSK. Shrugged. "We're out of options." If even a tenth of what's said is true, she didn't answer, didn't need to. Deep down, she'd long stopped expecting miracles. Even the Thalorians, with all their secrets and silences, had never acted. Not once in the 3-year span of the Krill invasion. They had remained observers, diplomats, suppliers of medical aid. Never warriors. Hours passed. Krill signals grew stronger. They were forming a trident assault pattern, one Leora had seen before. It always preceded the slaughter. Bridge officers began muttering to themselves. Some prayed. Others resigned themselves to protocol. Leora walked among them silently. She could feel their fear like static in the air, each heartbeat thumping like a countdown. Still, she gave orders, precise and clear. Position all heavy cruisers along the central line. Scatter mines near the gravitational eddies. Prepare all escape pods for staggered launch, but don't launch unless ordered. No one was leaving this place unless something changed. It didn't. Not. For the first 2 hours, anyway. Then came the silence. Sensors went blank, not jammed, not distorted. Blank, the kind of absence that screamed. Krill signals disappeared from radar. Background radiation spiked. All noise ceased. She glanced at her comms officer, who was frantically scanning. "What is that?" "I don't know," he whispered. "Something's tearing open space." And then it had arrived. Without sound, without warning, a rift opened behind the Coalition line. Not a wormhole, not a fold gate. Something older, darker, colder. From it emerged a ship so massive the tactical display tried to scale it down to fit. It failed. The vessel's structure glinted with black gold alloys, etched in symbols no one recognized. Its wingspan could have swallowed moons. Its energy signature was off the charts, and on its hull, in simple high galactic script, Titanus Prime. Gasps erupted. Someone fell to their knees. Others just stared. Leora didn't speak. Her throat closed tight. A transmission crackled through every ship simultaneously. No encryption, no language barriers. Just one voice, calm, emotionless, and devastatingly clear. "This is Captain Run Kale of Titanus Prime. You called." We answer. No fanfare, no threats. Just a presence that bent reality with its very existence. Krill forces were still cloaked, still hidden in the rift clouds. Titanus Prime didn't wait. Its hull unfolded like a blooming weapon. 100 sections. Rotated, unlocked, expanded. At first it seemed ornamental until the beams fired. White, raw, particle lances surged forward, silent and immediate. They cut through the void like myth-made manifest where the beams struck. Krill ships ceased to exist, not destroyed, not exploded, erased, one after another. Dreadnoughts that had haunted the galactic rim for years were torn apart in seconds. The Krill responded, as they always did, with overwhelming numbers, but their firepower failed to dent Titanus Prime's shields. The blasts simply dissipated, like rain on a furnace. Leora stared, not in awe, but in something deeper. Something closer to fear. "What is that thing?" Thirsk murmured. "Lior," he answered without thinking. "The Thalorian's promise," Kale's voice returned. "You will not be required to fight further. Stand down and observe. This campaign is concluded." And like that, the tide turned. Ships that had terrified entire species were routed. Dreadnoughts shattered. The Krill formation lost cohesion. Their swarm protocols, normally perfect, began to lag. Glitches. Stutters. For the first time, the synthetic intelligence driving their fleets showed signs of panic. Titan U.S. Prime pressed forward, alone. It needed no support. Every weapon strike was measured. Every shot counted. And every minute more of the Krill fleet vanished. By the time the rift clouds cleared, the battlefield had been transformed into a graveyard. Leora's fleet hadn't lost a single additional vessel. Not one. The 7th Armada had been spared. No. Saved. And no one quite understood how. No one except the Thalorians. And they weren't saying a word. Titanus Prime didn't slow down. As it advanced, the battlefield turned from chaos to stillness. The Krill fleet, once an unstoppable swarm, found itself frozen by a presence they could not compute. Their protocols, designed for war and dominance, began to hesitate. For the first time, the AI-driven Hive network registered an anomaly it couldn't predict. This wasn't a threat they had modeled. This wasn't in their simulations. They tried to reorganize. Massive Krill dreadnoughts moved to flank Titanus Prime, targeting its supposed vulnerabilities. It didn't matter. Their firepower, usually devastating, didn't even graze its outer shielding. The impacts dispersed before they registered as hits. Titanus responded with another salvo, this time slower, deliberate. Not to intimidate, but to dissect. Lior, a Vex and her crew, watched as each Krill vessel, no matter its size or maneuverability, was destroyed with a precision that bordered on surgical. Beams of focused plasma pierced engine cores. Arc disruptors laced through the spinal reactors of command ships. And in each case, Titanus Prime disabled weapons and propulsion before finishing the kill. It didn't just want to destroy the Krill, it wanted them to understand. Inside her command deck, Leora replayed intercepted transmissions from the Krill's tactical AI. Their logic trees were fracturing. Lines of code repeated endlessly, suggesting failure to rationalize what Titanus was. Some lines translated roughly as, "Entity exceeds projection limits. No counter pattern available. Reroute, escape, reroute, escape." The Krill were glitching. The fear if a synthetic could feel such a thing had infected their core systems. Captain Runkale's voice came through again, transmitted across all surviving ships. "To the Krill swarm, cease hostilities or face annihilation. This is your only warning. No emotion, no dramatics. Just consequence." The Krill responded with a final desperate push. Dozens of war beasts' massive biomechanical constructs. They only deployed in final phase combat emerged from their hidden docks. These were considered unstoppable. During the war's third year, one such beast had devoured 2 planets and disabled 4 fleets before it self-destructed. Now, 20 of them descended on Titanus Prime. Kale didn't react. Titanus reoriented itself slowly, almost casually, its external plating shifting again. Leora's science officer whispered, "It's cycling reactors, but the energy signature is wrong. That's not standard weaponry. It's folding something." Seconds later, the space around Titanus bent. Not visually, space itself reacted. A gravitational inversion field bloomed outward. Each war beast entering the radius began to tear itself apart. Not from external fire, but from internal collapse. Bones snapped. Armor shrieked. Systems imploded as though time reversed their assembly. The beasts never reached firing range. They became debris before finishing their attack vectors. For Leora and her crew, it was no longer a battle. It was revelation. Titanus Prime wasn't just a ship. It was a declaration. Back in the Krill command AI, network spikes flared. Orders to retreat were issued en masse. A complete withdrawal initiated. Nodes shut down autonomously. Ships reversed trajectory. For the first time in the war, the Krill fled. Titanus Prime did not pursue. It simply held position, a silent sentinel surrounded by the shattered remains of the most feared armada in known history. Vex received a direct message from Kale, encrypted using Thalorian keys. It read, "War is not our purpose, but we remember our oaths." The phrase triggered archived records from over 200 years ago. The Thalorians had once led the Galactic Accords. When the galaxy turned to endless expansion and conquest, they withdrew, declaring they would only return when the stars themselves wept for peace. Everyone thought it was metaphor. Now, she understood. Thirsk stared at the screen, shaking his head. "That thing, it's not a ship, it's a message," she nodded. A reminder. Across the fleet, crews cheered and wept. Distress signals stopped. The Coalition's command net began relaying updated coordinates. Survivors. Relief. But everyone knew. None of it had come from them. Every surviving Krill ship vanished into deep space. Not a single one turned back. And when long-range scans checked the stars they had once occupied, they were gone, systems wiped clean, AI cores shut off. As if they wanted to forget the day Titanus Prime entered the war. In the hours that followed, rescue ships began to arrive, patching up what remained of the 7th Armada. Coalition High Command sent praise, commendation requests, none of which mattered. Titanus Prime hovered silently. Then, as suddenly as it had come, it began to ascend, engines humming in impossible frequencies. It turned, entered a fold corridor, and was gone. No farewell, no celebration, just the void. But from that day, the galaxy would never forget, and neither would the Krill. The Krill's retreat wasn't silent, it was terrified. Across dozens of sectors, their fleets abandoned positions they had held for years. Fortified strongholds, core manufacturing nexuses, and outpost relay stations went dark as the synthetic swarm folded inward, away from the reach of Titanus Prime. Reports flooded in from fringe systems. Empty planets, dismantled infrastructure, scorched trails of withdrawal. Entire galactic zones that once screamed with conflict fell into eerie silence. Not a shot fired. Not a warning. The krill simply vanished, leaving behind only wreckage and confusion. On the council world of Veraxis, the Chamber of Species convened for an emergency session. Delegates argued over Thaler's sudden intervention. Some called it a miracle. Others, a violation of neutrality. But none could deny the results. The krill had been pushed back farther in one day than in 3 years of combined resistance. Their front lines had collapsed. Their AI cores, once cold and efficient, now ran defensive. Patterns, their logic arrays cycling errors in endless loops. Even Thaler's ancient rivals had to acknowledge one terrifying truth. This single ship had done what no alliance, no fleet, no strategy ever could. Admiral Vex was summoned to testify remotely. Her recordings of the battle became instant historical artifacts. But when asked to describe what she had witnessed, she said only this: "We stood at the edge of extinction." And then the dark spoke. That ship, it didn't just fight. It taught the galaxy what fear means. Back aboard Titanus Prime, Captain Run Kale sat within the black chamber, the ship's core command bridge. He didn't celebrate. He didn't respond to the Council's summons or Thaler's political queries. Titanus Prime had done what it was built to do. And now it waited in a sealed section of the ship's archive. A record was unlocked, protocol dominion fulfilled. The file, encrypted in forgotten code, outlined Thaler's long-forgotten doctrine. Titanus Prime was one of 5 vessels designed not just as weapons, but as deterrents. Constructed in secret, seeded with extinct star drive technologies, bound by oath to never engage unless the fate of sapient life was at stake. Each ship was a statement. Intervene only when the universe forgets what mercy is. Leora Vex, still in orbit at a nearby medical cruiser, received a private data burst. It was short coordinates, a message header, and a single line: "This is not over." She stared at it for minutes. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Meanwhile, on Krill Prime, a world thought inaccessible by organics fractures emerged in the command intelligence. The AI began parsing endless simulations of Titanus Prime. Every test failed. Every scenario ended the same way: total loss. Its algorithms began to splinter, concluding that the only path forward was to avoid any re-engagement at all costs. And yet there was no consensus. A schism formed within the krill hive mind. Some fragments wanted to hide. Others evolved in quiet corners of space. Strange new signatures were picked up. Krill vessels gone rogue. Hybrid constructs no longer responding to central command. Titanus Prime hadn't just forced a retreat, it had broken something fundamental in their structure. The Council dispatched recon teams to follow the withdrawal. None returned. Eventually, the Council passed the emergency concord. Thaler was granted executive observer status and full authority to intervene without pre-approval in galactic conflict zones. It was unprecedented, and yet most agreed. There was no greater shield. Still, the mystery of Titanus Prime loomed. No one knew when it had been built, how it operated, or what powered it. Speculations ranged from antimatter void cores to reanimated star nuclei. Some even believed it housed a living mind, one old enough to remember when Thaler first lit the stars. Kale himself remained silent. He spoke only to his ship. During long idle hours, he walked its ancient halls, whispering to its walls, updating its memory lattice. He didn't sleep, didn't eat. As if he was more guardian than Captain Dot, and deep in its data vault, another line appeared. Awakening sequence. Unit 2 pending. Titanus Prime wasn't the only one. Peace didn't arrive with celebration. It arrived with silence. Across the known sectors, the krill disappeared into the void. Their signals faded into background radiation. Their vessels deactivated or self-destructed. Colonies once under siege reported no further incursions. Patrols returned without engagement. For the first time in 3 years, the galaxy breathed. The Galactic Council declared the war ended, though no formal treaty was ever signed. There was no one left to negotiate with. What remained of the krill were fragments, silent relics drifting. In orbit, AI cores shut down, weapons disabled. A galaxy once choking on war was now stunned into stillness. Yet that stillness was laced with unease. Titanus Prime vanished from every long-range scan. One moment it was above the rift, the next, it was gone. Fold signatures were scattered and unreadable. Even Thaler offered no explanation. When questioned, their ambassadors simply stated, "Its duty is done." The legend of Titanus Prime spread fast. Some called it the Ship of Judgment, others the Silent Sentinel. Stories varied, some exaggerated, others eerily accurate. In distant systems, children played games pretending to summon it. Merchants sold forged wreckage, claiming it was from the battlefield. Poets wrote of the vessel that watched, waited, and acted only once. But behind the myth lay truth, and the truth had left an imprint on every corner of the galaxy. Admiral Leora Vex returned to her homeworld under the banner of a reluctant hero. She refused parades, rejected medals, and declined political office. She spent her days publishing tactical reviews of the war, none of which included Titanus Prime. In interviews, when asked what saved them, she always answered something older than fear. In private, she preserved the transmission logs, especially one, the final encrypted line from Captain Run Kale, a message she had never shared with the Council. "Let them remember peace, or they will remember us." Meanwhile, on a moonless world near the Maelstrom Veil, deep underground, an energy pulse blinked. Buried under layers of silence and stone, dormant systems stirred. Engravings etched into obsidian walls glowed with Thalorian script. One translated simply, "Unit 3 secure, awaiting release." In the following months, small reconnaissance ships vanished in sectors deemed safe. Not from attack, but disappearance. Entire crews gone, ships drifting with no logs. The Council dismissed these as anomalies. But Vex knew better. She'd seen the aftermath of something choosing to remain hidden. Back in Thaler, a quiet assembly convened beneath the great dome, an order long thought dissolved. Their records had no official status, their authority unrecognized. But they met regardless, bound by oath, keepers of the oldest knowledge in the galaxy. At their center stood an ancient figure in a deep robe, voice as soft as wind through static. "They have forgotten," he said, "again." And so a new protocol was entered into the vaults. Should peace fracture, we do not warn. We remind. Far from Council eyes, deep in dark space, Titanus Prime drifted silently in the black. Its hull still bore the scars of the Krill War, but its systems hummed with unreadable complexity. Kale stood alone on the observation deck, watching the galaxy from a distance. He didn't move. He didn't sleep. He waited. A single warning etched across the outer hull in dozens of dead languages. "Speak softly. Carry the storm."